VHS Massacre Radio. I'm your host, Tom Seymour.
And I'm your other host, Ken Powell.
And, we're doing the Twitch thing, nice. Getting into that realm. That should be a lot of fun.
Should be. Hopefully this one works this week. There is a test broadcast I posted earlier this week if you guys want to check that one out, too. I played Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves on the NES.
Nice.
I was a little unprepared because I was telling you I was maybe doing these NES games where like they had movies, and comparing the movie to the game itself. So
that sounds great.
Yeah, I pulled up Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, and gave that one a go. It's actually not a bad game.
Really?
Like, I'm really shocked. I don't know if you're familiar with the Elder Scroll games.
No, I've never played them. I mean, I know of them, but
very popular RPG games, and there's a lot of elements in those that are in this game. And it's an NES game. This is the 8-bit era, but there's actually a lot of layers to it, and I was kind of surprised. It's not a bad game.
Well, you know what I want to do? Hold on, I'm going to get up just for a second because I want to show people this. So, when we get into that segment where we're showing we're watching the movie and then playing the game, I think we can get into playing some Commodore 64 games. So this is my Commodore 64 Mini, which is pretty cool. You could load games on via USB, and it comes with about 64 games it comes with. But this was pretty cool. It's a little pricey though. It was like $150.
$150, yeah. I mean, I guess it's kind of almost the going rate for. Well, I guess it is a little bit more. Like the NES Classic, I think is like $75. The Super NES is like I think $75 also.
Yeah. So it's a little steep, but
But you said it has 64 games?
64 games, yeah.
Well, that's twice the amount of the games that those systems have.
Yeah. And, people don't realize that Commodore 64 was the best-selling computer in history. Best-selling personal computer in history,
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I was doing some research, too, for the games, and I think there's plenty out there, movie-based games. Actually, some of the better games, like the Ghostbusters, is notorious for having a really shitty NES game.
Yeah.
But I think the Commodore 64 actually has an actual real game.
Yeah.
That has the Ghostbusters doing Ghostbuster things.
I used to play it. I used to play it all the time. I loved it, so I thought it was pretty strong. Let's see. So, oh my God. So, Joe Bob Briggs movie marathon.
He's back. He's back. After a few little, I guess, technical difficulties, he broke the internet, as they say.
I was one of the people who could not get on Shudder.
Yeah.
I missed, I don't know. But I think I caught the last 30 minutes of Tourist Trap. And I'd never seen Tourist Trap.
I've never seen it either.
It's awesome.
it is very awesome, but the telekinesis thing just kind of threw me for a loop because it is very disturbing. Like the mannequins, the imagery, Chuck Connors as the evildoer. The telekinesis thing it added an extra layer that I was like, didn't have to go that way. They could just had like the.
Well, I will tell you, I didn't even know there was telekinesis. I didn't know if he was just magical and was turning people into marionettes or puppet or mannequins. Or I had no clue what was going on.
But yeah, I guess it does add to the madness of the film. Like the closing shot is the lead lady driving off with her friends all turned into mannequins, and she has like this crazed look on her eyes. So it could have been just like maybe it wasn't like telekinesis, but I think that's what it was implying, that he had like these magical powers.
So he was making her see these things?
No, I think he actually was doing those things. But you could, I guess if you want to try to dig deeper into a movie, maybe that might not be that deep. You'd be like, yeah, maybe he actually was just driving her crazy with these mannequins, because mannequins are kind of freaky.
Oh yeah, I mean they did such a great job with match cuts and making it at times fairly seamless, where it would cut from he'd walk up to some guy and take his arm off, and
Yeah.
it was pretty disturbing, you know.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, for what Joe Bob Briggs would call trash cinema, it was pretty awesome, you know.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think it was a great first choice to get back into the Joe Bob swing of things. That movie, though, like, I feel like it was the beginning of kind of our obsession with mannequins, because they're like in the 80s there was a lot of mannequin related I think Twilight Zone did a couple of episodes based on mannequins in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
There's the mannequin movies themselves, like
Yep.
1 and 2.
Yep.
And
Which
then,
I like those.
I haven't seen them since I think the 80s, so I don't know if they've aged out as well as some of the other 80s stuff.
No, they haven't aged well, but it's like they're just so hyper 80s that, like, if you want to revisit that, it's fine. As far as, like, being, I don't know, it's hard to say. I mean, they're so locked in the 80s, you know?
Yeah.
So it's like, if you like that, then they'll be classics, but, you know, certain people are going to go back to that and not even be able to watch it, I suppose.
I know it doesn't star James Spader, but it has a guy, right, that looks kind of like Spader, or reminds me.
I think Spader's in one of them.
Oh,
maybe
is he?
he's in
Well, maybe,
part two
yeah, maybe.
or something.
Maybe
Yeah,
it is.
yeah. I think Spader's in one of them. He plays a creep, and he plays like a manager in one of them.
He's a guy I would believe that would fall in love with the mannequin. The actual mannequin, not the mannequin that turns into the lady.
Right.
The mannequin itself.
Yep.
But yeah, Tourist Trap, definitely a disturbing movie. One of those that like I said, I hadn't come across it. I'd seen the artwork from it before, but I think, as Joe Bob alluded to, that the name Tourist Trap kind of throws you for a loop, that it's going to be more of like a Disney-esque, like he talked about Parent Trap.
Yeah, exactly. Parent Trap, or like, you know, I don't know. It could be like a Chevy Chase comedy. Like, you don't know what it's going to be. And that's why I never, like, when they announced Tourist Trap, I'm like, actually, I don't know what that is. But, so Joe Bob, his 24-hour marathon is so popular, it crashes Shudder.
Yeah.
To a point of, you know, functioning half the time. So I saw, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 films. It was great to see Tourist Trap, and then what else was I checking out?
Well, I watched Sleepaway Camp.
Oh yes, the end of Sleepaway Camp.
Still so disturbing.
Still so disturbing.
Yeah.
But if you think about it intellectually, like, it's not that big of a deal. I mean, yes, the killer is a murderer. That would be the most important thing. But it is odd that they're like, oh my God, it's a man.
Yeah. Not that it's a naked person.
A naked person with a knife making a fake, crazy face.
Crazy. One of the most disturbing, craziest faces in all of cinema, period. Who's a boy's head just rolled out of her lap.
Yep. And the guy's like, it's a man.
It's a man. Another first thought is like, oh my God, take him
run
down.
For your life.
Run for your life. Yeah, absolutely disturbing film. To me, still holds up very well. It does have some 80s themes in there, but I think it's still really great. There's the creepy. I mean, Joe Bob covered these things in his breakdown, but the creepy, perverted chef. That's like, I don't know if we'd even attempt these kind of characters in movies today. But Felicia Rose, he had her back to talk about her character Angela, which she's most famous for. So it was great having her, add some insight and go over the details.
And then he had historically he's had what they call the male girl,
mm-hmm.
and they were making fun of the fact that, like, because the star of Sleepaway Camp, like, I was the first female male.
Yeah.
But I was thinking, I was like, is he going to have a male girl? Because is that these days is that sort of like politically correct or whatever. But I mean that the male girl was like, she's a model. Like, I mean, that's her. That's the work she likes to do. And they had really funny banter back and forth.
Yeah.
And her character was kind of cool. She was sort of like contemporary texting during the show and stuff like that. And I thought it worked great.
Yeah, absolutely did work great. And Joe Bob covered some of his history beforehand, and like seeing how long he's been doing this, like well over 30 years now, and but still like very modern on topic. Like, I mean, he was even covering some issues of like the current political scene, like kind of thrown in there, which is was very funny. But he also wasn't afraid to like go into some places that I think some like a network TV station might not have allowed him to. Which is great that doing it on Shudder I think was like the perfect place.
Shudder's perfect. There's a paywall, and it's in if you're paying to get access to horror films, that audience is going to look for surprise or shock, or not that it was shocking at all, but the point is like that's the target audience, and so I thought it was perfect. The funny thing about Joe Bob Briggs is he's a pretty brilliant man, and it's sort of he sort of hides it through this like domestic beer drinking good old boy cowboy thing, but I mean the guy is like super smart.
Savant. I mean, he's just his wealth of knowledge, not only about films themselves, but like Chuck Connors and he gave this whole thing about how Connors started off as a baseball player, played in the NBA for a few seasons, and like all these little things that he would know about actors or he went into during Sleepaway Camp, like at the beginning, about the transgender laws in North Carolina and like all these little bits of knowledge. He's amazing. He's a guy that should have been on TV at all times. There should never have been a break from Joe Bob. I mean, unless he wanted the break. But
yeah, I mean, he's a master storyteller, and if you ever, I mean, you just listen to his cadence, the rhythm. I mean, listen to how I talk. I say I have uhs and ums all day long. This guy speaks in these like really entertaining, wonderful paragraphs of information, and you can just listen to the guy for like when we interviewed him for the VHS Massacre, we were captivated.
Oh, absolutely. We would have kept him there all night if we could. I mean, he is amazing to listen to on TV or in person, and I'm hoping that this, because like we say, he crashed the app itself. I struggled to get on forever. Like I gave up after the first hour. I was like,
I did too.
It's like I just crossed my fingers. Hopefully they do the right thing. They'll archive this and post it on the app, which they ended up doing. I think like the day after, and but he crashed it. So hopefully Shudder takes a note, and if he wants to do it, maybe they'll turn it into a series. I don't know, 6 to 12 movies, every year would be great.
I mean, if you look at the breakdown on the Shudder website, there's actually I think 14. Really, there's 12 proper sort of drive-in episodes, and then he's got a couple like behind the scenes and then testimonies and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But in 24 hours he created 12 episodes, and they're kind of like real drive-in episodes,
Yeah.
I thought that was great. I honestly don't know how he did that 24-hour marathon. For a while, I was like, is he really doing this? And I think he really did it. And the only thing I can think is there's got to be maybe 1 or 2 movies where he intros them and then goes and sleeps for 2 hours and then gets up.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, I mean he's an older gentleman too, so like even at my age, I value my sleep, and
I couldn't do it. I could not do what he did.
We've done our own crapathon like 6 years ago, and we weren't performing every half hour, and by the it was like 3 or 4 a.m. we were like crashed out.
Oh yeah.
But we were watching a little bit shittier movies.
We handpicked some of the worst. What's that Beast one? Beast of the Wild? Or
Beast of the Yucca Flats.
Oh, God.
There were so many bad ones. The Hobgoblin.
What was it? There's a movie Joe Bob Briggs brought up. He screened it. It was like one of the few movies he didn't give 4 stars. And it was something like Super Beast. And he was like, there's no Beast. There was never a Beast. But anyway, of course, I'm tweeting. I'm like, you created 12 episodes in 24 hours. You know, can you do this every 6 months? I mean, that would be great.
That'd be absolutely amazing. He wouldn't have to do a marathon, I don't think, you know, from here on out. He could do you know, every Friday night for, like, I don't know, 3 months, host, like, maybe 2 movies.
Yeah.
And, you know, and then the mail girl would have, I think, a little bit more, you know, we'd actually send in mail. And, I mean, even though they did have, like, a lot of emails and stuff like that, Facebook posts and all that. But I think it's amazing. It shows a testament of, like, the impact that he's had going back from the 80s when he was on the movie channel up until Monster Vision, and even his, you know, God stuff on the Daily Show. Like, he's just maintained a as a fixture in B-movie, bad movie, pop culture.
I think he was one of the first people to truly legitimize what he'd call trash cinema. You know,
yeah.
And I don't know if that. I think trash cinema, maybe that encompasses all of that sort of exploitation and cult and all that. And when he would talk about it, he would never really be disrespectful about the films. He really liked the stuff, and that's and so did millions of people. That's, you know, that's why these films were made and people watched them. It's just like in the mainstream for the longest time, you didn't really talk about those kind of films. They weren't, you know, so. Because I guess one of my friends, Craig had, I think it was, what was he on, Cinemax? No, it was...
The Movie Channel.
Movie Channel. We would watch Joe Bob, and we really got into these, you know, these trash cinema movies, and, you know, like Toxic Avenger and all that stuff. Although I would say that's a classic, not trash cinema. But, yeah, so I guess it sort of warped my brain. I never thought of those films as less than other films.
Yeah, I've always felt like they're on equal footing. They both, you know, Hollywood and trash cinema, B movies, exploitation. I feel like they've all offer something. Mm-hmm. It's up to you to, like, you know, look inside yourself or inside the movie and figure out what it has to offer. But I mean, just think about this. This man loves these movies so much that in the 80s, he tried to prevent Times Square, and, you know, whenever it changed over to being, I guess, what it is today, which is very Disney-esque. But it used to be like porno theaters and grindhouses.
Grindhouses, yeah.
He was fighting to keep them from changing that. And if you're old enough to remember, that Times Square was probably not really worth saving. Not with everything else that came with it. But he loved these movies so much, though, he felt like it was worth saving. So that tells you his testament to, like, how much he's, I guess, you know, he absolutely loves this stuff. It shows whenever you listen to him talk about them. And like you say, he never talks about them in, like, necessarily a complete negative way. Like, I think he does understand, like, you know, this might not be a great movie, might not even be a good movie, but there is some kind of worth there.
Yeah, absolutely. I was, I got to look through my photos for a second, but I was trying to find the, oh, okay, this is great. So Joe Bob Briggs has this thing called the Drive-In Oath. Have you ever read this?
No.
Because this was new to me too. So he's got the Drive-In Oath. We are drive-in mutants. We are not like other people. We are sick. We are disgusting. We believe in blood and breasts and beasts. In life, if life had a vomit meter, we'd be off the scale. As long as one drive-in remains on planet Earth, we will party like jungle animals. We will boogie till we puke. Heads will roll. The drive-in will never die. So, and I thought that was kind of insightful too. It's sort of like acknowledging that, we kind of like sick shit, and it like he's not. What I liked about reading this recently is that in my head, it's like, do you have to justify liking exploitation or trash cinema? Do you have to intellectualize it? Because a lot of it's not, like, it's not what you call politically correct. But Joe Bob never sort of made excuses for it. He was just like, I like this stuff. And it's a weird time we're in where you can't, it seems like you can't even admit what kind of stuff you like, you know?
I think so. I mean, it is, with the current climate, it can be dangerous to admitting to liking certain things. It's a fine line, and I understand where like some people are coming from, but then I'm like also like I don't feel like you should be ashamed to like be like, yes, I love seeing boobs in a movie. Like
yeah. It's not porno. It's just it's. I mean, you look at Shakespeare. I mean, how much or Hamlet. It's like how much death and or Julius Caesar. Like, I mean, there's murder and death and sex and all your classic literature. So it's like, why is it different now? Like, does everything need to be sort of tame?
I feel like it's almost probably better to admit that you absolutely love porno versus actually liking like trash cinema sometimes. Like, I mean, it's kind of like the weird how the I guess it swings around these things.
Yeah, like W. Sean would talk about how like younger people would judge her for doing nudity in horror films. Meanwhile, like their role model is Kim Kardashian, who has done 2 pornos essentially.
Oh yeah,
that's what they are. They're pornos. That's
how she's famous.
Yeah.
Doing a sex video with another more famous person at the time than her.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean it's crazy. I think that as long as that the women that worked on the movie, as long as they haven't been mistreated in any type of way, and that they freely took the role and are comfortable 100% with doing the nudity, to me there's nothing wrong with it. It's great. I mean
it's still art. I mean, that's the thing that makes me mad. Like, most colleges have live model drawing.
Yeah.
And it's nude. Your standard live drawing class is a nude model. It's art. I'm sorry, trash cinema is still art. You can not like it, but I don't like the tearing down of it. Is what my point.
No. I mean, just be like, it's not for me. It's not my taste, and then kind of move on. I mean, I'm not going to rip on somebody who loves romantic comedies, even though like I don't like them. But right, I'm not going to rip on somebody for that. So I'll take my Toxic Avenger, and you can take your I Have Mail.
Failure to Launch.
Yeah.
You've Got Mail. Wow. Going back, is that Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan?
I think so.
Should we get into the movie of the week?
Movie of the week, yeah. Escape from the Bronx.
Escape from the Bronx. Yeah. Let's hear your thoughts.
Well, this is a sequel to last week's movie. I guess it's kind of like a direct sequel. It seems like it takes place almost immediately following the events of 1990 Bronx Warrior. Our lead is the exact same lead, Mark Gregory. He's playing Trash again. And even though this movie was shot not too long after that one, he kind of looks a little older for some reason.
Yeah, in the 1990 Bronx Warrior, he had like super baby face. Yeah. Now he looks a little older. He didn't look quite as ripped as he did.
No, and I think this movie, they were only filmed months apart. Like, whatever one was completed, he moved on to the next one. I think there is a movie that came in between these 3 that's not like officially part of this sequence, but he filmed 3 movies within, I think, a 2-year period. But I feel like, whatever money or whatever Trash is doing, like, I don't know if he's putting it up his nose or, he just he didn't look the same. Like,
well, like when I was looking at this on IMDb, it internationally, it was called Bronx Warrior 2.
Yeah.
And then it was also called Escape 2000. And I think Mystery Science Theater did a spoof on it.
Spoof for the Escape 2000.
So, it's so funny because, like, over here it's Escape from Bronx. Clearly ripping off of John Carpenter.
Yeah, I think they were trying to do probably a couple of things. One, rip on the John Carpenter thing, which, you can tell this director he definitely likes John Carpenter's movies.
Oh, yeah.
But also, I think to distance itself from 1900 Bronx Warrior, by calling it something else, because I think you can watch this movie and not have seen the other one and still not feel like you missed anything.
Yeah. The director is Enzo G. What is it?
Castellari.
Castellari. Sorry.
Castellari. Yeah, our Italian names.
Castellari. Yeah, sorry about that. And I thought this was like a huge improvement over the first one, personally. I mean, I like the music better.
Yeah.
I think some of the actions, set pieces and scenes were actually pretty good. There's one scene where this crazy explosion happens, and he's sort of like falling down this ladder that's like hanging.
Yes.
And he falls all the way down, and it becomes like Pit and the Pendulum, this heavy metal like sort of like step ladder, sort of fire escape type thing is dangling above his head. And suspension of disbelief is just really great. You really believe in the sort of fear factor. Forgive me, but I thought it was really cool. Yeah,
actually, that to me is the scene that stands out the most, just because it's so well done. With a lot of B movies, sometimes there's what would you call it? Well, with your shots, you got to be very frugal, I guess, with how much footage you can cover and everything. And this one was really well covered. You absolutely felt like that there was this tension of this ladder waiting for it to drop on our hero character. Really well done. I think they extended it out like even a longer time than you would kind of anticipate with these kind of movies, because a lot of these movies on the cheaper side will have shown the ladder shaking and then cut to like the ladder falling almost immediately. This one like kept the ladder shaking, and you kept like waiting, like, is he gonna like duck out of the way in time? There's also something that we didn't talk about last week. We kind of mentioned some of the practical effects, but again, with the practical effects with the flamethrowers, I felt like are really well done. Like, it's very convincing. Like in the beginning, these guys are going around clearing out the Bronx, and like they light this homeless guy on fire, and it's really well done for a movie of this magnitude.
I mean, you sort of definitely have to question the practicality of walking through the Bronx with flamethrowers as the most effective way to kill people. But beyond that, it looked awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and it's like a nice kind of fucked up beginning to a movie.
Yeah.
It was funny. They're essentially wearing spacesuits.
The suits are kind of silly looking.
Yeah. I thought that stuff was great. I mean, it was almost reminded me a tiny bit of the beginning of Dawn of the Dead, where they're kicking in they're in like the ghetto and they're kicking in the doors and just shooting people. I thought that was great. I should mention Henry Silva as Floyd Wrangler, and he was like the villain essentially, who was basically a Nazi.
Yeah, well, we talked about the last movie having some imagery, Nazi imagery.
Mm-hmm.
This movie also basically the Nazi guy, but also like our hero. I don't know if he had this in the first movie, but he had a jacket with the Confederate flag on.
I nenever saw it in that first film.
Yeah, I didn't catch it, and so with these two movies, I'm like, I don't know. It's a little questionable. Like, okay, what is this guy? Is he like? Is he into this kind of stuff, or does he feel like this is kind of like the punk thing to do?
I can't make an excuse, nor would I want to excuse someone wearing a Confederate patch, but I guess if it's because essentially this is emulating American cinema, so it's a bunch of Italians, and part of it is shot clearly in New York, but maybe there's just not quite the depth of awareness, and also in the 80s, like things like Dukes of Hazzards, and they kind of had the Confederate flag and around a lot.
It was on the car.
Yeah, I think the rationalization is that it's quote rebels.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
So the Bronx gang are rebelling. It's the rebellion, but it's not cool to have a Confederate flag.
No, it's not. I mean, and I think taking along it's Bible codes with like with the Dukes of Hazzard. You had the Duke boys who were the good guys, but they were also kind of the outlaws, and especially back in the day. I mean, it's still kind of true today. When we know in the current climate, where like they're removing the Confederate flag for good reason. But, then it was like kind of like a sense of pride is what they were saying, but also like they were rebellion against the sheriff, Roscoe, and I mean, I love that TV show, but it is like I can't watch it and be like, this is cool, like, or they should continue doing this.
Yeah.
I think with this movie though, with the Nazi thing from earlier, and now with this thing with the patch, I don't know, it just. I'm like, I need to maybe investigate this guy a little bit more.
This
just to see, this director, just to see.
It's like
just make sure.
Mussolini's grandkid or something.
But other than that, yeah, I think this is a superior film. I wouldn't say like superior film, but it is a better film than the first one.
Yeah.
So I think maybe with the running through that first one, and then he directed another one, and he directed this one.
But I think it's pretty clear, right? Our issue is that the good guys have occasional swastikas,
yes,
and the Confederate flag. If it was the bad guys, who gives a fuck?
Yeah, because I mean they're bad guys.
It makes a quality bad guy if they're
absolutely.
Really
I mean, and like I don't have a problem with like the Confederate flag being used in a movie whenever it has like a purpose. Whenever if you're dealing with an outlaw biker gang. Yes, that imagery is used all the time, and if they're the bad guys, then that's what they would wear, and that makes it easier for whenever they're murdered off by the good guy. It's justified. But whenever you have the hero, and he's clearly the hero because he survived the first one, he's the hero in the second one. It makes it a little tougher to like. Actually, it pulls me kind of out of the movie and makes me think. Going back to this director, like,
right,
what is this director trying to do? What is he trying to say?
Yeah, and who knows? Yeah.
I mean, like even in Troma's library, they have a few movies that have like the rebel flag, like the Redneck movie, and
yeah, sure. And
but they were like, I mean, they're
depicting
a certain like, I mean, in the South,
badly behaved.
Well, and in the South, that is still in the South that is still a symbol you will see a lot, even though like despite the removal from a lot of places, you'll still see it flying in the back of a truck of somebody or out in the yard of somebody's house. You'll still see that symbol. So it makes sense. For this movie set in New York City, though, I mean, it's a little weird. I would just say it's a little weird.
Yep. And then the lead actress was Valeria de Obisi as Moon Gray, the reporter, who she's sort of like the gussy reporter trying to get the word out, and you think it's gonna end with something, and just gets greased like kind of fast.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, this is the second girl like he's kind of lost in the movie too. It's like trash. Just love is not in the cards.
Yep. He goes on this big diatribe about there's this underground, and this actor. I think he's supposed to be Latino, I guess.
Yeah.
And I was like, this looks like a really hairy Italian guy.
Which he probably was.
Which he probably was, given that it's an Italian film. And they live in the underground, and Trash is sort of like, yeah, you sold out, you're a wimp, you went underground too fast. And then he goes back home to find his parents burned alive because they were the holdouts, so it's an interesting message.
Which is kind of weird, because I'm like, when I found out Trash had parents, I'm like, I don't remember them from the original. I guess it wasn't
right.
Big
His
deal,
parents were like lovely people. Like the mother seemed sweet, and the guy was living in his neat Bronx apartment, hit their one bedroom. Yeah, it was a little strange. He was drinking a bud, and it just feels pretty domesticated considering the last film.
Yeah. Well, you know what we should do, since we're doing the Twitch thing now? Why don't I play a trailer from the movie? Let's just do that. Kick that over. The thing about this this trailer, though, is like there's no dialogue again. which kind of
Oh, really? It's all music and action.
Well, you have a narrator that's like, Escape from the Bronx.
Yeah.
Which there's some of the cool scenes with the guys that were talking about.
All the miniatures. Yes, there are some really. You'd say they're unbelievable miniature explosions of buildings from the Bronx. I mean, they look sort of like two-dimensional. But I love seeing it. But the thing that's unfortunate is that they cut to these miniatures, and they blow them up, and then they cut to the live action, and there were fairly significant explosions there. I was just thinking, man, they just should have not used the miniatures,
Yeah. Even though, the miniatures, like I say, it was cool to see that kind of detail in a movie like this. Like, I was totally unexpected. Like, you don't see miniatures in these size of films most of the time.
I just feel like, they upped it in this one. I feel like there was just a lot more extras. There was a lot more gunplay. Just a ton of... Some decent gore, too, like when they would smash... There's a couple scenes where they smash people's heads in.
Yeah.
It's like the motorcycle people, and they smash their visors in. And
yeah, I think Trauma would be proud. Like some of these practical effects that they used. Like I say, I feel like they've worked on a couple of other films before this one. Got a lot of good practice in. I'm assuming a lot of the crew was the same, so they learned a lot, applied it in their lessons. I would be interested in knowing exactly how big this budget was. I was looking it up.
I couldn't find a budget on it.
Yeah, I mean, I know, I think Italy financed a lot of this movie. The reason why they had to shoot, the interiors in Italy and the exteriors were done in New York City. So, who knows exactly how much they got, but it feels like it was if you told me it was $1 million, I feel like that'd be believable.
Oh, yeah.
But if you also said it was $100,000, I'd be like, man, that's kind of believable, too.
Yeah, I guess it really just depends. I mean, there's a lot of gunplay, not a ton of squibs, a lot of people getting mowed down with no body damage, you know. But it never bothered me to a point where I wasn't into it. You know what I was thinking about too was, how we talked about how maybe the world's view of the Bronx at that time, this came out in '83.
Yeah.
Which means they shot it in early 80s, and the first one, it could have been late 70s when they shot the first one.
Yeah.
Like, the view of the Bronx was different, right? Like, you had mentioned, the Bronx, a large portion of it burned down in the late 70s.
Yeah.
And so I was looking that stuff up. And the New York Post had written about it, and what the biggest sort of misconception about that was that they claimed it was like mass insurance fraud, that people were just kicking people out of the building and then burning it down for the insurance money. But what they said was, actually what happened was they shut down a ton of fire stations. So it was a mass shutdown, and they calculated the shutdowns based upon response time. So it was something like if they had a slow response time, they just shut them down. And the data was really flawed.
Yeah. Because
it wasn't... I mean, they didn't even track how the data was gathered.
Yeah. I think there's maybe even a documentary about that, too, about the Bronx fire. It might have been Bronx on Fire or something like that. That covers that. Another thing that was happening in the 70s is a lot of fires were happening in... I think a lot of it was because of the closures of the fire stations. And then with the heat wave, and then the power that shut off in the city, which led to desolation in parts of the Bronx, but also Brooklyn. There's areas of Brooklyn that went from really thriving parts of the city to being kind of slums, and only within the last 5 to 10 years have kind of made a trend back up, but not all of Brooklyn has. And just like in the Bronx, I think we've talked about this on the podcast when we knew that James was moving out to the Bronx, and the Bronx would seemingly be the next place, because Brooklyn's already experiencing its kind of, you can call it gentrification or renaissance. I guess it depends on which side of the fence, but it's improved in terms of, I think, the quality of living in the buildings. I don't know if it's gotten... Is it a better culturally? I don't know. That's not up for me to say.
I don't know.
Depends on how you feel about Whole Foods and things like that.
Yeah.
But the Bronx would be, in theory, the next place because it's like,
it's still cheap out there.
Still cheap.
It's the train is, reasonably close. I mean, you can grab a train and get to Midtown, and not that long. I don't know, 45 minutes an hour or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, you could go from the top of New York City to the bottom on a single train. So it seems like it would be the next place that would experience its, revitalization. But we shall see. Like, I still feel like it. There's, I think I talked about it last time. Somebody, a comedian, was like, if you read one of these crazy articles in the newspaper, it's either Florida or the Bronx. It's like alligator eats woman out of toilet. It's like it's either happened in Florida or it happened in the Bronx.
That's funny.
So I think the Bronx is still kind of in that category. There's a sad story of the kid that was stabbed to death by this gang. And you still get stories like that out of the Bronx. So
yeah, it's definitely still has a ton of problems. But it's interesting too, like the international perspective on like this must be why there was so many damn Bronx movies, right?
Yeah, I think so.
They calling everything Bronx, like Rumble in the Bronx. That was shot it came out in the 90s, but that was probably shot earlier, late 80s, early 90s. But and like that's not the Bronx. Like it's like
Well, I mean, I don't know if it's specifically Italians, but I think Europeans and maybe specifically Italians were obviously obsessed with the Wild West in America.
Mm-hmm.
And so what would be kind of the modern day Wild West at the time? Probably the Bronx.
Probably the Bronx, yeah, exactly. And they were on a Warriors kick. They were clearly on Escape from New York kick. Yeah. This is probably coming off the heels of also Mad Max and Road Warrior. So like or at least Mad Max, I think.
Yeah. No, Road Warrior I think came out in '82.
Okay, yeah. So, yeah, it kind of all makes sense. And then and the obsession with flamethrowers too. I wonder if that's like sort of a nod to the Bronx fires.
It could be, but also I think that might have more because with the Vietnam had just came on the hills, and there's a lot of famous imagery of the soldiers with flamethrowers. That could be a nod kind of to that as well. Both of those things, the Bronx on fire.
Yeah. And I mean, it's brutal and it looks cool in slow motion. There's a bunch
it looks great in slow motion. Very brutal. It's also very like it's still kind of like a murdering somebody from a distance, but yet way more personal than like a gun is.
Yeah.
Just because of the brutality of it.
And I think that's what it was, right? It was trying to depict a sort of genocide, so you're going to go full in, and so it's like what can you show? You're going to show mass shootings, and you're going to show flamethrowers,
But like you said, flamethrower might not be if you wanted to wipe out everybody that lived in the Bronx, might not be the most practical weapon.
Yeah, you wouldn't think that would be the most efficient, What I learned from this film is that if you have a revolver and you shoot at a helicopter about 4 or 5 times, you will blow the entire helicopter up. This also works with vans and Porsche 911.
It's Porsche.
Oh, sorry, Porsche 911.
Yeah, I didn't. Well, not to go off topic, but I until about 2 months ago did not know that it's actually called Porsche and not just Porsche. All my life I called it Porsche.
Yeah, that's what I call it.
Yeah, it's technically
Porsche 911.
Yeah, Porsche. But yes, the helicopter blowing like that is kind of almost a laugh out loud scene because of shooting a gun from the ground up, I don't know, let's say 200 feet just to be nice, 200 feet away with like 4 bullets, and the explosion is kind of funny because it has like this little dummy model that like is stuck in one position that kind of flips out of the helicopter. It's like I appreciate the craft, but there is like a nice little chuckle moment.
And then the last thing, which it's like offensive, but I could not help finding it humorous, is that there's a child in the film, the kid is really good at throwing hand grenades. He's probably looks like to be about 8, and this kid's got he's like John Elway. He's like, I'm not a sports guy. Is that a good reference?
From if we were in the 90s doing this. Tom Brady.
He's like Tom
Brady.
He's like Tom Brady.
If Tom Brady was good looking.
And he's throwing grenades and things are blowing up left and right. Also, the kid seems to have a thing for yelling out homophobic slurs.
Yeah.
Which, just coming out of a child's mouth is very... there's no... I mean, I busted out laughing because I was like, what the fuck?
Yeah, again, going back to Sleepaway Camp and things that they wouldn't do in a movie today, that is something I also don't think they would do in any major film. I think even B movies might be afraid to even touch having a child say those terms.
Yeah.
But it definitely elicited a chuckle from me.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know what to say. I mean, when we talk about movies, we don't rate them. We just talk about what we liked about them or what not. But I think in honor of Joe Bob Briggs, I'm just this once I'm gonna go 4 stars. 4 stars from Escape from the Bronx.
4 stars from Escape from the Bronx. I would have to concur. I mean, it was an enjoyable film. I'm glad we've watched this Bronx trilogy. I've enjoyed all 3 of them in different ways. I give them all 4 stars. And like I say, they're kind of an unofficial trilogy.
Yeah.
We're racking our brains about what to call this because of the spaghetti western. I was thinking maybe Lasagna Apocalypse.
Lasagna Apocalypse. That's pretty good.
Yeah, because they're kind of apocalyptic movies. Zombie or Lasagna Apocalypticos. I don't know.
Yeah, I was gonna call it something like Spaghetti Bronx Wasteland Pictures. I don't know.
Carbonara Wasteland. I don't know. We're still working
on that. Yeah. So the same director directed all 3.
No. The other movie was directed by somebody else. I can't remember his name now. But these last 2 were directed by the same director. The first film was an Italian movie.
Italian Bronx-based gang movie.
Yeah.
And that was Bronx Executioner. Then we had 1990 Bronx Warrior.
Yeah. And
then same director and some of the same cast, Escape from the Bronx, a.k.a. Bronx
Escape
Warrior
2000.
2. Yeah.
Also, the first movie, The Bronx Executioner, some of the scenes were pulled from another movie called Final Executioner, which is also available to watch, and maybe at some other point we'll attempt that one as well.
There is a few... I saw one list. There is at least a couple more Bronx post-apocalyptic. I don't know if they're Italian. They may not be.
All right.
But that's something I might look into. I think of Escape from the Bronx as the Dark Knight of this. Whatever would you call it?
Lasagna Apocalypse movies.
Lasagna Apocalypse movies. Yeah. Because I just think the quality was better. I thought it was a little tighter.
Which is fitting because we are on the exact 10-year anniversary of Dark Knight being released.
Yeah, that's crazy, right? Wow.
Yeah. 10 years didn't seem that long ago. I can remember I was in Afghanistan, came home on an R&R in August. I think it was the first week in August, and Christy, my wife, we went to go see that movie, and the rest is history. I mean, the film still holds up. We watched it last night just to kind of reminisce and have some nostalgia about our little date that we went on to go see it. But
yeah, it's
still a great little film.
Still great, yeah.
Little film.
Great, huge film. Oh, yeah, speaking of filming, so I got this, for those who may be watching out there on the Twitch feed, I got this Cinelens. It's SLR Magic is the brand. Let's see. I don't know. You might be able to see that. SLR Magic. And it's a 35 millimeter. 1.4 T1.4. That's the T stop versus the f stop.
And this is going to go with which camera that you have? This
will go with the GH4. And good thing about the cinema lenses is they're geared, so you could add a follow focus, and also the distance that you can pull focus is greater, so that it's more accurate. It's easier to actually make cinematic focus pulls. But
that smooth pull focus is very important. If you watch any major cinema film and you see them, rack focus from the foreground to the background, they obviously will have one of these.
Yeah, and that's what you realize too. That it's not fair per se. Like they're using the lenses could be $30,000 lenses. And it means that it's easier for them to pull focus. It's easier for them to get beautiful shots.
Yeah.
We were going through. I was showing some cameras off the other day, and this guy I worked with, Frank. He was showing off his Ursa Mini. So he was shooting at night. I think he had a prime on there, which means it was fast, so it didn't eat up that much light. So he was able to shoot at a 400 speed at night without additional lighting, and it was totally clean.
That's amazing.
Yeah, right. So it's if you get the more expensive gear is going to give you more consistency, and it gives you that edge.
And that's the thing with it's 1.4 for the f-stop, the t-stop.
Yeah.
Which that's extremely fast lens, so that you have the ability to more light to come in, and when you hit the sensor, so you can shoot in more low light areas.
Yeah. And for the GH4, which I have, GH5 is much has higher ISOs, but
the 4 is no slouch, right?
It goes up fairly high. I forget what the max is, but it's probably above 6400 or something like that.
I mean, it's an amazing time that we're living in. We're the democratization of film and everything like that, the cameras and stuff. There's not a huge difference between what a smaller independent studio can shoot versus what you can go and shoot yourself without of spending millions of dollars.
Yeah, if you had, I'd say, $10,000, you could get everything you need to shoot a gorgeous, 4K film with cinema lenses.
Yeah. Have you seen? Speaking of shooting films, have you seen Soderbergh's most recent film, Unsane, that he shot on an iPhone?
No, I like Soderbergh. Sometimes I think he gets a little too cool for school with his filming. What do you think?
It's an okay movie. I mean, I will say it rises above the ranks of being a Lifetime-esque movie, because you have this. It's about a stalker, and but I don't know what the iPhone did per se, outside of being something he could talk about whenever.
Gimmick, yeah. And the thing that I don't like about that is that you can get a Lumix G7 Panasonic DSLR camera for it's less than $500 now. So you could get it for probably $450 with a stock lens, a very decent stock lens. You could shoot in 4K with a real lens. So you can do things like pull focus. You can zoom in to 50 millimeters to get shallow depth of field. You'll get more color space. You'll get more dynamic range. So can you shoot on an iPhone? Yeah, you can. But some of those iPhones are $1,000.
Oh yeah.
It's the DSLR's half the price. So part of me really gets. I think people think it's something to brag about, or it's a cute, kitschy thing. I shot this on my iPhone. It's okay, but for half the price, you could have had decent glass.
Yeah.
You could have had more control over the image. So why you're bragging about spending more, actually, and it's kind of idiotic. But
yeah, for a person like Soderbergh, I mean, the only thing I can say is if he's doing it to kind of say to other younger filmmakers, don't let the camera get in your way of shooting film. But the thing is, we've already seen other people do it. The movie Tangerine was one of the first major films, and it was accepted, I think, to Cannes.
That came out years ago.
Yeah, that was years ago. So he wasn't he was covering some new ground to inspire filmmakers. But like I say, it gave him something new to talk about, I guess. But he also, again, they had to use little lenses that were made specifically for the iPhone. The sound was great, so they were probably using, once again, they were using extremely expensive.
They're using two-system sound.
And they had a little gimbal device that they could use, so they get smooth tracking shots. And when I was looking at it, it's in a weird aspect ratio too. It's not 4:3 and it's not 16:9. It's some weird aspect ratio that I don't know why it was done that way.
He probably just did it because it's different. You know what I mean?
And again, like you say, I like Soderbergh's work. Sometimes though, he allows these little things to become more than the film itself, instead of concentrating on the work. And he's supposed to be a guy who said he was going to stop making movies, but he made this movie. So I don't want to discourage him from working. Like, he does make some good movies.
Oh, when they're great, they're great. Yeah. I love Schizopolis, which is probably his least popular film.
And Traffic, I still love Traffic.
Traffic's good, yeah.
But this is a really cool. It's nice and hefty too. That's the difference between, I guess, like a lot of the cheaper kit lenses you'll see. It has a nice, good strong body. Like the glass, I think, is very heavy.
Heavy glass, solid metal. Yeah. So it's pretty decent lens. So SLR Magic, and I've done some tests, and the stuff looks pretty good. It's comparable image-wise to Rokinon, which is it's almost double the price. But this, if you opened it wide open, it actually loses focus a little bit.
Yeah, so. That's one of the things with a lot of the faster lenses too. Like the sharpness will, if you open it all the way up, you lose a little bit of your sharpness with it. So there is, just like with the camera and the ISO that it's rated, has like a sweet spot. The lenses also have like this sweet spot for sharpness as well.
Yep. So SLR Magic 35mm T1.4, and I think I paid $260 for it.
It was off Amazon.
Off of Amazon. Yeah, Adorama.
Adorama.
So, yeah.
Nice
So that's pretty
shot.
cool. I don't know. That's all I got. You got anything else?
That's all I got too. Do we want to talk about like the lens and stuff, like the VHS Massacre?
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah.
I don't know if you want to you just mention who. Well, I think we mentioned this last week. Who our first interview is going to be?
Yeah. So we're going to be interviewing W. Rashan on the 29th, and we're going to be using this lens, the GH4, and probably your Blackmagic setup too as a second camera. Actually, this guy Frank might come with his Ursa Mini. We might have a shootout,
Nice.
We're going to try to do a nice 3-camera shoot. But we're going to be interviewing W. Rashan. And also she had said that Joe Bob Briggs is interested in coming out again and doing an interview with us. I don't think it's going to be on that same date.
I'm excited to interview him again, though, after, when we interviewed him, he was kind of like, if you're measuring his career in peaks and valleys, and not to say he has peaks and valleys in his career, but it would probably be more in the valley. And now I feel like he's back in the mainstream. He broke the internet and all that, like we talked about.
Yeah, so. It had been, I think he said it had been 17 years since he had at least a drive-in or monster show.
Yeah.
And although I think he did Daily Show after that, and he does he'll go and host a screening at Alamo Draft House all the time.
Yeah, up here in Yonkers, not far away. He's up there almost, I think, maybe monthly or maybe even weekly.
Yeah,
definitely monthly.
He writes too. He writes a lot too.
Yeah.
So he's always been active, but he in that marathon said that he didn't think it would be so long between shows.
No, I don't think. Especially if you look at his career. He went, actually, I think it was maybe 6 months between doing the movie channel show to doing Monster Vision, which that's no time at all.
Mm-hmm.
You go from one to the other. And I think you look at it from Monster Vision, it's okay, where's the next, what's the next channel? Sci-fi, whatever it's going to be. And it didn't happen. And it's kind of sad. I don't know if maybe, because 9/11 happened right after, I think, Monster Vision, and that kind of changed programming and... Not to say that Joe Bob never made it back home because of 9/11, because the one and the two don't have a direct correlation. But 9/11 did change some vibes of things that in pop culture.
I think so. I think also the nature of his drive-in show and pushing trash cinema, like it. I can see how there wasn't always venues for him. You know what I mean? But I don't understand why something like Cinemax wouldn't reach out to him in like 2007 or something and give him a show then. That doesn't make sense to me. Like there are plenty of those. AMC Spike,
absolutely, a ton of networks out there that it came along. G4, whenever they were doing video, that was the video game channel. Mm-hmm. That would have been kind of perfect too, because I think a lot of that nerd pop culture audience would have translated to what Joe Bob was doing. If you look, the angry video game nerd, one of the biggest supporters of Joe Bob, he would fit on G4 just as easily as Joe Bob would. So yeah, it's to me kind of embarrassing for Hollywood and all these entertainment companies not to utilize this great tool, put them on their network, because I don't know the exact ratings that Monster Vision got back in the day. But I know when he was on the movie channel, it was like by far the most popular show that they had. Mm-hmm. The reason why they canceled the show is because they wanted to move in a different direction.
Yeah.
So that's the reason why that show went away. And the Monster Vision, though, I don't know why exactly they canceled it, but I'm sure they did good ratings there too.
Yeah, and I always loved the concept too of this sort of late night show that would come on. And, it's cheap. It's a cheap show to produce, so I never understood why those type of shows went away. I guess they sort of fell out of fashion, maybe, somehow.
I guess. I mean, if you look at especially when he was on Monster Vision, which that was I saw a little bit of him on the movie channel, but actually that's where I saw the Sleepaway Camp the first time was on the movie channel, when I probably shouldn't have been seeing it at that age. I saw a lot of movies I shouldn't have been seeing at that age. The Thing was one of those other ones that should not have seen when I was like 5 years old. But when he was on Monster Vision in the mid '90s, as a teenage boy, that was perfect. But you grow out of being a teenage boy, and girls come along, school comes along, these different things come along, and they kind of pull you away. And maybe a lot of that audience, that core audience, got kind of pulled away, and it wasn't being replaced with the same type of kids,
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, now that we're all middle aged, maybe we're really craving this Joe Bob show,
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't say I'm an immature adult or whatever, but you kind of come back around to it now. I'm grown. I have certain things that I like. I think I'm more precise with the things that I want to view and the things that I crave. And Joe Bob hosting movies is one of those things that I absolutely want to see. And it's unfortunate with YouTube, they can't post the full movies. They have a bunch of Monster Vision segments which have him just talking about the movies, and those are great, and he's great to listen to. But it's to have the whole film to kind of it's a whole experience.
People complain about that, and if you go on Shudder, the last couple videos are just sort of testimony why they like Joe Bob, and people are they're pissed. They're like, Monster Vision was this TNT show, this big cable network. It's Ted Turner, right? So they're like, you're gonna make me watch a VHS dub off of YouTube, and it's without the movie in there, and they're kind of like, fuck you, where is this stuff,
Yeah, I know the TNT Turner, they have that stuff, and I mean, there might be a rights issue. I'm sure there's definitely rights issues that go into this. But you would like to see them work this out. Hopefully the Shudder thing grows into something bigger, and then maybe we'll see some of the Monster Vision stuff come along, things that are easier to acquire the rights. I mean, I would absolutely love to see the whole catalog, because there were some things that I missed along the way, but I would still love to go see some of these. But I mean, and that's the kind of the great feeling that I got from when I sat down and watched that Tourist Trap episode. It's I have this though. And not only do I have this, I have technically, I think, 13 movies that I can watch right here with Joe Bob.
Yeah, it's really wonderful, and that's why I'm like, they got to have him do it again. And I don't know if he might be like, dude, it might take him 6 months to plan and recover. It's what do you have to do to hopefully he got some sleep, and that's 24 hours. But
yeah,
honestly, even if he did it once a year, you'd have 12 episodes a year.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that's pretty awesome.
Absolutely. I think though, if in terms of thinking of like Shudder as a business, I think business wise, they should find a way. Like I would stay with Shudder. Like it's a little bit expensive for the $4.99 compared to like a Netflix, which has like a lot more selection. Though I will argue that a lot of the selection is bad. But if Shudder was to like somehow find a way to do like 1 or 2 movies a month with Joe Bob, I would absolutely maintain my subscription over the year.
Yeah, that's true.
Like I'm going to, I already did my free trials over with, and I'm paying them the $4.99 this month so that I can watch the rest of these because I want to get to them and enjoy them. And I'll decide then if I maintain my subscription. Depends on like the other selection of movies and stuff. But with Joe Bob, I could promise him like if you do once a month of content from him, I will gladly hand over $4.99 so I can have some Joe Bob in my life.
Yeah, I would do it. Yeah, I mean, if he's up for it, do a weekly show. That'd be great.
Yeah, that's the other thing. It's like we don't know if Joe Bob really.
Well, he talked about this as the last time. He repeatedly he was like, this is the last time I'm doing it.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing. It's like, I wish you wouldn't be saying that because especially once it broke the Shudder thing, it's like this is like there is a demand, and it's not just like myself, you, or and
it's not just like the 500 people used to attend horror conventions like 10 years ago or whatever. Yeah. It's like it's thousands and thousands.
Yeah, and when you start thinking about it, because I was thinking about this today when I was watching Sleepaway Camp, that Shudder knew that Joe Bob was going to be on there, and they knew that there was going to be a demand. And Shudder is an app that's been around for a couple of years, so they know like what their peak traffic is. So they had to be prepared that they were going to see a spike, but their preparedness for that spike wasn't even good enough. Like
no.
it exceeded even their expectations.
It had to. It technically exceeded their capabilities, which means they either didn't plan well enough, or they were overrun. And that's wonderful. It's wonderful for him too. If he just says, that was great, I don't need to do it again. I guess that's fine. I'll be disappointed, but I mean, as long as Shudder around, we'll have those 12 episodes or 13 episodes, right?
Yeah, I think it's 13 episodes. I think they did an extra movie, which is great. Like I'm glad that they that's even more stuff than we were initially promised. And like you say, the thing is that they're absolutely rewatchable just because of even the movies themselves. Unlike the TNT versions, which sometimes were bastardized, they wouldn't have any of the boobs. All the swear words would either be replaced with like really funny stuff, or they wouldn't even have them at all. So with Shudder, you're seeing the movies in their full versions. Like you got the surprise ending in Sleepaway Camp and all of its glory or non-glory.
And it's great hearing Joe Bob just swear, and there's one time he was talking about like independent film directors and method actors, and he's like, they don't like that shit on the set, and it's like, it was great, just hearing him just let loose was great.
Yeah, and like you say, he is a master storyteller, so that will always make those episodes rewatchable.
Yep. Yeah. Well, anyway, so we'll let you know. I guess we're back next week. We got to find a new movie to watch.
Yeah, a new movie to watch. I think we'll move away a little bit from the Bronx.
We'll take a week away from the Bronx. Thanks everyone for watching. Thanks for checking this out on Twitch.
Yes.
Hopefully this works out well. I'm your host, Tom Seymour.
I'm your other host, Ken Powell. Check you later.
Bye.